the man dealing cards across the scarred poker table in Benton, Arkansas, had shoulders broad as an ox yoke and hands that moved like water over stone. But Rebecca Vale noticed something else entirely: the way his storm-gray eyes softened when they met hers, even as she swept another pot of coins and crumpled bills toward the growing pile at her elbow. It was August 1882, and the saloon smelled of whiskey, tobacco smoke, and the particular desperation of men who had been losing money for 3 straight hours. Rebecca had arrived in town that morning on the stage from Little Rock, her traveling dress dusty from the road, her reticule containing exactly $47, and a letter from her deceased father's lawyer informing her that the family ranch she had hoped to inherit had been sold for debts. She had walked into the Silver Dollar Saloon not looking for a card game, but for information about work, any work that might keep her fed while she figured out what came next. Instead, she had found a table of cattlemen complaining that their regular dealer had taken sick, and when the tall cowboy with the quiet voice had asked if anyone knew how to handle a deck, Rebecca had surprised herself by stepping forward. Her father had taught her poker during long winter evenings on their ranch outside Fort Smith, teaching her to read tells and calculate odds the way other fathers taught their daughters needlework. He had been dead 8 months now, carried off by pneumonia, and her stepmother had wasted no time selling everything and moving to St. Louis with a furniture salesman. Rebecca had thought she might claim what was rightfully hers, but the law had other ideas about what belonged to stepdaughters. The cowboy had looked her up and down with those gray eyes, taking in her travel-worn dress and the determined set of her jaw, and then he had done something that surprised her. He had smiled, slow and genuine, and stepped back from the table. "Lady wants to deal. Let her deal," he had said. "I will play instead." His name was Ryder Cole, she learned, and he was foreman at the Triple Bar Ranch 15 miles east of town. He folded his long frame into a chair across from her, and 4 other men joined them: 2 ranch hands, a shopkeeper, and a man in a dusty suit who claimed to be a land surveyor. They anteed up, and Rebecca shuffled the deck with the smooth confidence her father had drilled into her, and they played. 3 hours later, she had won nearly every hand Ryder dealt when it came back around to him, and most of the others besides. The ranch hands had tapped out after the first hour. The shopkeeper quit when he was down to his last $5, muttering about beginner's luck. The surveyor played longer, but his face was an open book. He chewed his lip when he bluffed and touched his collar when he held something good. Only Ryder remained inscrutable, his expression never changing whether he held a pair of 2s or a straight flush. But Rebecca won anyway. Not because she could raid him, but because the cards simply fell her way, hand after hand. An improbable streak that should have made the other players suspicious, but instead seemed to amuse Ryder Cole immensely. He lost money steadily, betting with casual confidence, and folding without rancor when she revealed yet another winning hand. "You are either the luckiest woman in Arkansas or the best card player I have ever seen," he said finally, his voice carrying a hint of admiration as she raked in another pot. "My father taught me," Rebecca said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "He said a woman should know how to take care of herself. Smart man." Ryder studied his cards, then looked up at her with an expression she could not quite read. One more hand. The saloon had grown quieter as other patrons gathered to watch. Rebecca felt the weight of their attention but kept her focus on Ryder. She nodded. He dealt with practiced ease, his movements economical and sure. Rebecca picked up her cards and felt her pulse quicken. A full house, queens over 8s. A strong hand, maybe too strong for the situation. She had already taken so much of his money. The smart thing would be to fold, to leave gracefully with her winnings and find a boarding house for the night. Instead, she met his bet. Ryder's expression did not change. He raised. Rebecca called. When she laid down her cards, she expected to see disappointment or irritation cross his face. Instead, he looked at his own hand, a pair of jacks, nothing more, and then he looked at her, and something shifted in the air between them. "You won," he said simply. Then, before she could respond, he reached up and pulled a silver ring from his left hand, a simple band engraved with a pattern of leaves and vines. He pushed it across the table toward her, and he smiled. The saloon fell silent. Rebecca stared at the ring, her heart suddenly pounding. "I do not understand. I have been playing cards since I was 15 years old," Ryder said, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear beneath the murmur of confused conversation around them. "I have played in Denver and Dodge City and New Orleans. I have played against professional gamblers and con men and cattle barons. I have never seen anyone play the way you just played." "It was luck," Rebecca said, though her voice wavered. "Maybe." Ryder leaned forward slightly, his gray eyes holding hers. "Or maybe you are exactly what you seem to be, someone who knows what she wants and is not afraid to reach for it. That ring belonged to my grandfather. He gave it to my father, and my father gave it to me. I have been waiting for someone to give it to, someone who would understand what it means." "We just met," Rebecca said, though even as the words left her mouth she felt the inadequacy of them. Something had happened at this table, something more than cards and chance. "I know." Ryder's smile widened. "But I figure if you can take all my money and leave me grateful for it, you might be worth knowing better. Consider it a stake. Stay in Benton for a while. Let me buy you dinner and show you why this dusty little town might be worth your time." Rebecca looked at the ring, then at the pile of money in front of her, then at Ryder Cole's weather-beaten face and steady eyes. Every practical instinct told her to take her winnings, find a stage heading anywhere else, and start over somewhere nobody knew her story. But something deeper, something that felt like her father's voice in her memory, told her that running was what had brought her here and maybe staying was what would take her forward. She picked up the ring. It was warm from his hand, heavier than she expected. "Dinner," she said carefully. "And conversation, but I am keeping my winnings." "I would not expect anything else," Ryder said, and the warmth in his voice made her feel, for the first time since her father's death, like she might not be entirely alone in the world. The other spectators began to disperse, the show apparently over, and the bartender called out something about closing up the table. Rebecca gathered her money carefully, folding the bills and stacking the coins, and when she looked up again, Ryder was standing, extending a hand to help her from her chair. She took it. His palm was calloused from rope and reins, and his grip was gentle but sure. He did not release her hand immediately, and she did not pull away. They stood there in the lamplight of the Silver Dollar Saloon, connected by touch and by something neither of them had words for yet, while the piano player in the corner started up a slow tune and the bartender began wiping down tables. "There is a boarding house 2 streets over," Ryder said. "Run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. She is honest and her rates are fair. I can walk you there if you would like." Rebecca nodded, and together they left the saloon, stepping out into the warm Arkansas night. Benton was not a large town, a main street lined with businesses, a few side streets of houses, and beyond that the dark expanse of farmland and forest stretching away into the distance. The air smelled of dust and honeysuckle, and somewhere a dog barked once and fell silent. "You said you arrived this morning," Ryder said as they walked. "You were not planning to stay." "I was not planning much of anything," Rebecca admitted. I came because I thought I had property to claim, but I was wrong. Now I am trying to figure out what comes next. What did you do before? I helped run my father's ranch. Cattle mostly and some horses. I can keep books, mend tack, doctor sick animals, and shoot well enough to keep coyotes off the stock. She glanced at him. Not skills that translate well to town life. Depends on the town, Ryder said, and the people in it. They reached the boarding house, a tidy two-story structure with a front porch and window boxes full of petunias. Ryder knocked, and after a moment a gray-haired woman in a neat shirtwaist answered, her expression shifting from wariness to warmth when she recognized him. Ryder Cole, what brings you into town on a weeknight? Evening, Mrs. Patterson. I have a friend who needs a room if you have one available. The widow's sharp eyes moved to Rebecca, assessing and not unkind. I have a room. $2 a week, breakfast included, dinner extra if you want it. No men upstairs, no drinking, no noise after 10 o'clock. That sounds perfect, Rebecca said, grateful for something definite in a day that had spun increasingly beyond her control. Mrs. Patterson stepped back to let her enter, and Ryder touched the brim of his hat. I will come by tomorrow around noon if that suits you. There is a restaurant at the hotel that serves a decent roast chicken. Rebecca found herself smiling. I will be here. She watched from the porch as he walked away, his long stride carrying him back toward the main street and the lights of the saloon district. The ring was still in her hand, and she slipped it onto her thumb, the only finger it would fit. The silver was cool now, the engraved pattern catching the moonlight. You could do worse, Mrs. Patterson said from behind her, and Rebecca jumped slightly. I beg your pardon, Ryder Cole. He is a good man, works hard, treats people fairly. Lost his parents when he was 17. Cholera took them both within a week of each other. He could have lost himself to grief or drink, but instead he worked his way up from ranch hand to foreman at the Triple Bar, and old Mr. Brennan trusts him more than his own sons. The widow paused. Not a man who gives away his grandfather's ring lightly. Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks. It was just a gesture. We only met today. Some things do not need time, Mrs. Patterson said, but her tone was gentle. Come inside. I will show you to your room. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the side garden. Mrs. Patterson brought her fresh water and clean towels, pointed out the privy in the backyard, and wished her a good night. Left alone, Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed and counted her money, almost $200 now, more than she had expected to have after buying her stage ticket. Enough to live on for a few months if she was careful, enough to buy passage somewhere else if Benton proved unwelcoming. But as she undressed and washed the dust of travel from her face and hands, she found herself thinking not about leaving but about staying, about gray eyes and a slow smile, about the way Ryder had dealt cards with the same competence her father had shown with everything he touched, about the ring now sitting on the washstand, gleaming in the lamplight. She slept better than she had in weeks. Ryder arrived precisely at noon the next day, driving a buckboard wagon pulled by a pair of matched bay horses. He had cleaned up since the night before, fresh shirt, shaved jaw, his dark hair still damp from washing. Rebecca had dressed in her best day dress, a blue calico that had seen better days but was at least clean, and she had spent longer than necessary pinning up her hair. You look lovely, Ryder said when she came down the porch steps, and the simple sincerity in his voice made her pulse quicken. Thank you. You clean up well yourself. He helped her into the wagon, his hand steady under her elbow, and they drove the short distance to the hotel. The restaurant was busy with the lunch crowd, but the proprietor greeted Ryder by name and led them to a table by the window. They ordered chicken for her, beefsteak for him and sat facing each other while the sounds of conversation and clattering dishes filled the air around them. "Did you sleep well?" Ryder asked. "Better than I expected." Rebecca folded her hands in her lap, feeling suddenly shy. "Mrs. Patterson told me about your parents. I am sorry." His expression flickered, but he nodded. "It was 10 years ago now, still miss them, but the sharp edge of it has dulled." He paused. "She said your father passed recently. 8 months ago, pneumonia." Rebecca looked down at her hands. "He was all I had. My mother died when I was young, and my stepmother made it clear I was not part of her plans once he was gone. So you came here hoping to claim your inheritance, and found out the ranch had been sold to pay debts I did not know existed." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "I should be more upset about it, but mostly I just feel relieved. I did not want to fight her in court, and I did not want to run a ranch alone. I just wanted something that was mine. And now I have $200, a room in a boarding house, and a stranger's ring on my thumb." She pulled it off and set it on the table between them. "You should take this back. It is too much." Ryder looked at the ring but did not touch it. "Do you want me to take it back?" Rebecca opened her mouth to say yes, the sensible answer, the safe answer. Instead, she found herself shaking her head. "No, but I do not understand why you gave it to me." "Because when you walked into that saloon yesterday, you looked like someone who had been knocked down but was still standing," Ryder said. "And then you sat down at that table and played cards like you had nothing to lose and everything to prove. I have watched a lot of people play poker, Rebecca. Most of them are trying to take something from somebody else. You were not. You were just trying to win. Is there a difference? All the difference in the world." He leaned forward slightly. "I gave you that ring because I wanted you to know that someone saw you, really saw you, and liked what he saw." The food arrived then, giving Rebecca a moment to collect herself. She was not used to this kind of directness, this absence of game playing. The men she had known in Fort Smith had been either too respectful of her father to speak plainly or too dismissive of her as a woman to take her seriously. Ryder Cole did neither. He treated her like an equal, and the novelty of it was both exhilarating and terrifying. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing more easily than Rebecca would have thought possible between two people who had known each other less than a day. Ryder told her about the Triple Bar Ranch, about the cattle drives and the daily work of keeping several thousand acres productive and profitable. He talked about Mr. Brennan, the ranch owner, who was growing old and whose sons were more interested in spending money than making it. He talked about the future of ranching in Arkansas, how the railroads were changing everything, bringing markets closer but also bringing competition. Rebecca found herself talking about her childhood, about learning to ride before she could read, about helping her father with the spring branding and the fall roundup. She talked about the books she had read during long winters, about her dream of seeing the ocean someday, about the strange mixture of grief and relief she felt at being unmoored from everything she had known. "You could work at the Triple Bar," Ryder said as they finished their meal. "We could use someone who knows cattle and can keep books. Mr. Brennan's current bookkeeper is 70 years old and half blind. He is too stubborn to admit it, but we are all terrified he is going to make a mistake that costs the ranch money." Rebecca blinked. "You are offering me a job." "If you want it. It would mean staying in Benton, at least for a while. The work is not glamorous, but it pays fair and you would be good at it. You do not know that. You have never seen me keep books or work with cattle. I know you can handle pressure without losing your composure. You can calculate odds in your head faster than most men can with pencil and paper, and you are not afraid of hard work." Ryder's smile was crooked. "That is more than enough for me." Rebecca picked up the ring from the table, turning it over in her fingers. The engraved pattern caught the light, intricate and beautiful. If I take this job, people will talk. They will say I am your mistress or worse. People talk no matter what you do, Ryder said. But for what it is worth, Mr. Brennan's wife, Sarah, is a formidable woman who will not tolerate impropriety on her ranch. You would have your own quarters in the main house. You would take your meals with the family, and anyone who suggested anything improper would answer to her. And probably to me. The protectiveness in his voice made something warm unfurl in Rebecca's chest. She closed her fingers around the ring. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. But even as she said it, Rebecca knew her answer. She had spent 8 months drifting, mourning not just her father but the future she had thought she would have. Ryder Cole was offering her a different future, one she had not imagined, but that felt oddly right. A chance to use her skills, to build something, to stop running and start living. Actually, she said slowly, I do not need time. If the offer is genuine, I accept. Ryder's smile could have lit the whole restaurant. It is genuine. When can you start? Tomorrow. Tomorrow is perfect. They shook hands across the table, and Rebecca felt the same jolt of connection she had felt the night before, like something clicking into place. Ryder held her hand a moment longer than strictly necessary, his thumb brushing over her knuckles, and she did not pull away. The next morning, Rebecca packed her few belongings and settled her account with Mrs. Patterson, who smiled knowingly and wished her well. Ryder arrived with the buckboard again, this time with a young ranch hand named Tommy riding alongside on a sorrel horse. They loaded Rebecca's trunk and traveling bag, and she climbed up beside Ryder for the 15-mile journey to the Triple Bar. The day was clear and warm, the Arkansas landscape rolling past in shades of green and gold. They followed a wagon road that wound through farmland and forest, crossing 2 creeks and passing several smaller ranches. Ryder pointed out landmarks, a distinctive rock formation, a stand of old-growth pines, the boundary marker for the Triple Bar's property. Tommy rode ahead, whistling tunelessly, occasionally turning to grin at them. He seems happy, Rebecca observed. He is 19 years old and in love with the cook's daughter, Ryder said. Everything makes him happy right now. Were you ever 19 and in love? Ryder glanced at her, something flickering in his gray eyes. I was 19 once. The in-love part came later. How much later? I will let you know when it happens. The answer should have been deflecting, but the way he looked at her when he said it made Rebecca's breath catch. She felt the weight of the ring in her pocket she had taken to carrying it there, a talisman against uncertainty, and wondered if she was being foolish. She had known this man for 2 days. She was about to move onto his ranch, into his world, based on nothing more than instinct and a desperate need to believe that good things could still happen. But when they crested a hill, and she saw the Triple Bar spread out below them, a big ranch house with a wraparound porch, barns and outbuildings arranged in neat order, corrals full of horses and cattle grazing in distant pastures, she felt something settle in her chest. This was real. This was possible. This was a chance. Sarah Brennan turned out to be exactly as advertised, a tall, capable woman in her late 50s with silver-shot hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She met them at the front door, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked Rebecca up and down with an assessing gaze that would have been intimidating if not for the warmth beneath it. So you are the card player who took all of Ryder's money, she said, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. I am. I hope he has not oversold my abilities. Ryder does not oversell anything. If he says you can do the work, you can do the work. Sarah stepped back. Come inside. I will show you to your room and then we can discuss your duties. The ranch house was spacious and well maintained, with polished wood floors and comfortable furniture that spoke of money, but not ostentation. Sarah led Rebecca upstairs to a corner room with windows facing east and south, letting in floods of morning light. The bed was larger than the one at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, covered with a quilt in shades of blue and green, and there was a desk with a lamp and writing supplies. "This was my daughter's room before she married and moved to Texas," Sarah said. "It has been empty for 3 years, and I am glad to see it used again. You will share the washroom at the end of the hall with my son's wife Emma. She is visiting her sister this week, but you will meet her when she returns. Breakfast is at 6, dinner at noon, supper at 7. If you need something outside those times, the kitchen is always open, but clean up after yourself." "Thank you," Rebecca said, feeling slightly overwhelmed by the efficiency of the welcome. "This is more than generous." "It is practical," Sarah corrected. "We need a bookkeeper, and Ryder says you need work. It is a fair exchange." She paused at the door. "But for what it is worth, anyone Ryder vouches for is welcome here. He is a good judge of character." After Sarah left, Rebecca unpacked her belongings, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her few personal items on the dresser. The room was bigger than any she had ever had, and the view from the south window looked out over the ranch yard and the pastures beyond. She could see Ryder down by the corrals, talking with 2 other men, his gestures animated as he explained something. Even at this distance, she could pick him out by the way he moved, loose-limbed and confident. She pulled the ring from her pocket and set it on the desk, wondering again what it meant. A promise, a hope, or just a gesture from a lonely man to a lonely woman, both of them reaching for connection in the midst of their separate griefs. The work began that afternoon. Sarah took her to a small office off the main parlor, where ledgers and papers were stacked in precarious piles on a massive oak desk. The elderly bookkeeper, Mr. Yates, sat in a chair by the window, squinting at a page of figures through spectacles so thick they made his eyes look enormous. "Mr. Yates, this is Miss Rebecca Vale," Sarah said. "She is going to be helping you with the accounts." The old man looked up, and Rebecca saw both relief and resignation in his face. He knew he was being replaced, but he was too tired to fight it. "About time," he said gruffly. "These eyes are not what they used to be." Rebecca spent the next 3 hours going through the ledgers with Mr. Yates, learning the ranch's systems and procedures. The Triple Bar ran cattle and horses, sold beef to markets in Little Rock and Memphis, bred and trained working horses for sale to other ranches and to the Army. There were payrolls to manage, supply orders to track, sales and purchases to record. Mr. Yates had done his best, but Rebecca could see where mistakes had crept in: transposed numbers, miscalculations, missing entries. Nothing catastrophic yet, but the kind of errors that could compound over time. "You have a good eye," Mr. Yates said as she pointed out a discrepancy in a feed bill. "Better than mine, that is certain. You have kept this ranch running for how long? 23 years. Then you have nothing to be ashamed of," Rebecca said gently. "I am just here to help shoulder the burden." The old man's eyes softened behind his thick spectacles. "You are kind to say so, but we both know I am being put out to pasture, and it is past time." He stood slowly, his joints creaking audibly. "I will spend the next few days showing you everything, and then I am going to go live with my daughter in Pine Bluff and let her fuss over me. It will be a nice change." By the time Rebecca emerged from the office, the sun was setting and her head was swimming with numbers. She found Ryder on the front porch, sitting on the railing and watching the last light fade from the sky. "How was your first day?" he asked. "Overwhelming. The accounts are a mess. Can you fix them?" "Yes, but it will take time. We have time." He gestured to the space beside him on the railing. "Sit for a minute. Watch the sunset." Rebecca climbed up beside him, and they sat in companionable silence as the sky turned from blue to gold to pink to purple. The ranch settled around them, the sounds of animals and men gradually giving way to the chorus of crickets and frogs. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and another answered. "You miss Fort Smith?" Ryder asked after a while. "Not as much as I thought I would," Rebecca admitted. "I miss my father. But the place itself, I think I was holding on to it because it was all I had left of him. Now that I am somewhere else, I am realizing that I can carry him with me. I do not need the land. He would be proud of you, for becoming a bookkeeper. For being brave enough to start over." Rebecca looked at Ryder's profile, silhouetted against the darkening sky. "Can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you really give me that ring?" He was quiet for a long moment, and Rebecca began to think he would not answer. Then he turned to face her, and his expression was open and honest and just a little bit frightened. "Because I looked at you and saw someone who could be a partner," he said. "Not just a wife or a helpmate, but an actual partner. Someone who would stand beside me, not behind me. Someone who would call me out when I was wrong and celebrate with me when I was right. Someone who would bet everything on herself and win." He paused. "I know it is too soon to say things like this. I know we barely know each other. But I have learned that life is short and chances are rare, and when you meet someone who makes you want to be better than you are, you do not let them walk away." Rebecca's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "I could still walk away. We have not made any promises." "You could," Ryder agreed, "but I do not think you will." "Why not?" "Because you are here. Because you took the job. Because you are still wearing my grandfather's ring, even if it is in your pocket instead of on your finger." His smile was crooked and hopeful. "And because when you look at me, you look the same way I feel." Rebecca knew she should be cautious. Knew she should protect herself, take things slowly, not trust so much so fast. But caution had not saved her father or her home or her future. Caution had left her alone and adrift. And the man sitting beside her on this porch railing was offering something she had not dared to hope for, not just work or security, but connection, understanding, the possibility of love. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the ring. Without speaking, she slipped it onto the ring finger of her left hand. It was still too large, spinning loosely, but the meaning was clear. Ryder sucked in a breath. "Rebecca, I am not saying yes," she interrupted. "Not yet, but I am saying maybe. I am saying I want to see where this goes. I am saying you are right, we barely know each other, but I feel it too." He took her hand carefully, his thumb brushing over the ring. "That is more than I hoped for. Do not make me regret it. I will do my best." They sat there on the porch railing until full dark, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. And Rebecca felt something she had not felt in a very long time: hope. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Rebecca spent her days in the ranch office, untangling accounts and establishing new systems. Mr. Yates stayed for 10 days, teaching her the quirks and peculiarities of the Triple Bar's operations. And when he left for Pine Bluff, he clasped her hand and told her she was the best thing to happen to the ranch in years. She took over his duties entirely, working closely with Sarah to manage household expenses and with Ryder to track ranch operations. The work was detailed and sometimes tedious, but Rebecca found satisfaction in bringing order to chaos. She discovered that the Triple Bar was more profitable than the ledgers suggested. Several sales had been recorded incorrectly, making it look like the ranch was barely breaking, even when in fact it was doing quite well. When she showed Sarah and Mr. Brennan the corrected figures, the old rancher's face lit up with relief. "I knew we were not doing as poorly as the books showed," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I thought I was just being stubborn, not wanting to admit we were in trouble. "You were right to trust your instincts," Rebecca told him. "The ranch is sound. You have been making good decisions. The record-keeping just had not kept pace." Mr. Brennan was a weathered man in his 70s, still strong but showing the effects of a life of hard work. He looked at Rebecca with something like wonder. "Ryder said you were good. He did not say you were a miracle worker." "I am just a decent bookkeeper who learned from a father who hated debt and loved accuracy," Rebecca said, but she felt warmth spread through her chest at the praise. She saw Ryder every day, but often only in passing. He was up before dawn and rarely finished work before dark. The ranch required constant attention, from managing the cowboys to checking fences to overseeing the breeding program for the horses. But he always made time to find her, even if only for a few minutes. He would stop by the office to ask a question about an expense or to report a sale, and they would talk about the numbers but also about everything else. He told her about his day, about the Mustang that was proving impossible to break, and the calf that had been born with a twisted leg but was learning to walk. She told him about the patterns she was discovering in the accounts, about the opportunities she saw for improving profitability, about the letters she was writing to markets in New Orleans and Chicago. And slowly, carefully, they told each other the smaller, more personal things. Ryder talked about his parents, about the ranch they had run before the cholera took them, about his younger sister who had married a farmer in Missouri and sent letters twice a year. Rebecca talked about her mother, whom she barely remembered, and about her father's quiet strength and her stepmother's cold efficiency. They talked about their fears and their hopes, their regrets and their dreams. 6 weeks after Rebecca arrived at the Triple Bar, Ryder asked her to go riding with him on a Sunday afternoon. It was late September, and the heat of summer was giving way to the first cool breath of autumn. They rode out to the eastern pastures, where the land rose into gentle hills covered with shortgrass prairie. Ryder led her to a spot where a creek tumbled over limestone rocks, creating a natural pool shaded by cottonwood trees. "I come here when I need to think," he said as they dismounted. "It is the prettiest spot on the ranch." They sat on a fallen log by the water, their horses grazing nearby. The air smelled of grass and water and the faint spice of fall. Rebecca watched the play of light on the creek and felt more at peace than she could remember feeling in years. "I have been thinking," Ryder said after a while, "about us." Rebecca's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "What about us?" "About the fact that I am falling in love with you, and I do not want to wait any longer to tell you." She turned to look at him, and the expression on his face took her breath away. It was open and vulnerable and absolutely certain. This was not a man who spoke lightly or made promises he could not keep. This was a man who had thought carefully and chosen deliberately. "Ryder, you do not have to say anything back," he interrupted. "I know it has only been 6 weeks. I know you might need more time. But I have never believed in hiding the truth or playing games, and the truth is that you are the first person I have met who makes me want to build a life, not just run a ranch. The first person who makes me think about a future that is more than just work and sleep and getting through the day." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have been trying not to because it scares me. Everything I have ever loved has been taken away, but I cannot seem to help it." Ryder reached out and took her hand, his fingers threading through hers. "I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen. Life does not work that way. But I can promise that whatever comes, we will face it together. I can promise that I will be honest with you, even when it is hard. I can promise that I will respect you and support you and do everything in my power to make you happy." "That is more than most people get," Rebecca said, And then she was kissing him, her free hand coming up to cup his jaw, and he was kissing her back with a tenderness that made her chest ache. It was not their first kiss. They had stolen a few brief moments over the past weeks, but it was the first one weighted with declarations and possibilities. The first one that felt like a beginning rather than an experiment. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Ryder rested his forehead against hers. "Will you marry me, Rebecca Vale?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They rode back to the ranch in the golden light of late afternoon, and when they told Sarah and Mr. Brennan over supper, the older couple exchanged knowing looks and raised their glasses in a toast. Sarah hugged Rebecca and whispered, "I knew the moment Ryder brought you here. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." The wedding was planned for November, giving Rebecca time to order a dress from Little Rock and send word to Ryder's sister in Missouri. They were married on a clear, cold Sunday in the parlor of the ranch house, with the ranch hands and local neighbors crowded in to witness. Rebecca wore a dress of ivory silk with lace at the collar and cuffs, and Ryder wore a new black suit that made him look both handsome and slightly uncomfortable. The circuit preacher performed the ceremony, and when Ryder slipped his grandfather's ring, now properly sized to fit Rebecca's finger, onto her hand, his eyes were bright with emotion. "With this ring I thee wed," he said, his voice strong and clear, and Rebecca felt the words settle into her bones like an anchor, like a promise, like coming home. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with food and music and dancing in the cleared barn. Rebecca danced with Ryder, with Mr. Brennan, with young Tommy, who blushed furiously the entire time, and with a dozen other men from the ranch and the neighboring properties. But it was Ryder she kept coming back to, Ryder whose hand she sought in every crowd, Ryder who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. They spent their wedding night in Ryder's room, now their room in the foreman's cottage behind the main house. It was a simple space, but Ryder had cleaned and prepared it with care, bringing in fresh flowers and making sure everything was as nice as he could make it. They came together with a mixture of nervousness and eagerness, learning each other's bodies the way they had been learning each other's minds and hearts. Rebecca had worried it might be awkward or disappointing, but instead it felt like the most natural thing in the world, an extension of everything they had already shared. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Ryder traced the line of her jaw with gentle fingers. "I love you," he said, simple and true. "I love you too," Rebecca replied, and knew it was the truest thing she had ever said. The months that followed were the happiest of Rebecca's life. She continued managing the ranch accounts, and under her careful stewardship, the Triple Bar's profits increased significantly. She identified new markets, negotiated better prices for supplies, and implemented systems that saved time and money. Mr. Brennan began consulting her on major decisions, valuing her opinion as much as Ryder's. Sarah treated her like the daughter she had missed since her own daughter moved to Texas, teaching her recipes and ranch lore and the 100 small skills that made a house a home. But it was the life she built with Ryder that mattered most. They fell into routines and rhythms, learning to work together and live together and navigate the small compromises that marriage required. They argued sometimes about money, about ranch decisions, about whose turn it was to bank the stove, but they learned to argue fairly, to listen as much as they spoke, to apologize when they were wrong. They learned each other's moods and needs, when to offer comfort and when to offer space. And they learned joy. Long rides on Sunday afternoons, sitting by the creek and talking about everything and nothing. Quiet evenings in their cottage, reading aloud or playing cards. Rebecca still won most of the time, and Ryder pretended to be outraged. Working side by side during the spring branding, when every hand was needed, and Rebecca proved she had not forgotten her father's lessons about managing cattle. Dancing in the barn at harvest celebrations, their bodies moving together with easy familiarity. In the spring of 1883, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. She told Ryder one evening in their cottage, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He went very still for a moment, and then a smile spread across his face like sunrise. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. He pulled her into his arms, careful and gentle. "Are you scared?" "Terrified," Rebecca admitted. "My mother died in childbirth." "What if Sarah delivered 3 babies herself and helped with dozens more?" Ryder interrupted. "And there is a doctor in Benton now, a good one. You will have everything you need, and I will be here, I promise." The pregnancy was easier than Rebecca feared. She felt sick for the first few months, but otherwise healthy and strong. Sarah fussed over her, making sure she ate enough and rested enough. And the ranch hands treated her with a mixture of reverence and awkwardness that would have been funny if it had not been so sweet. Ryder was attentive without being overbearing, helping her with tasks that became difficult as she grew larger, but never making her feel helpless. Their son was born in December of 1883, 2 weeks before Christmas. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Rebecca was certain she would not survive it. But Sarah stayed by her side, coaching her through each contraction, and the doctor from Benton proved as competent as promised. When the baby finally emerged, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Rebecca cried with relief and joy. Ryder held his son with shaking hands, his face a study in wonder. "He has your nose," he said, and Rebecca laughed through her tears. They named him Thomas after Ryder's father. Thomas Cole was a healthy, hungry baby who grew quickly and filled their cottage with noise and life. Rebecca loved him with a fierceness that surprised her, a protective instinct that made her understand her own father better. She also discovered that motherhood was exhausting in ways she had not anticipated, and she was grateful for Sarah's help and for Ryder's willingness to share the burden. He changed diapers and walked the floor with a colicky baby and got up for night feedings without complaint. "This is what partners do," he said when Rebecca tried to apologize for waking him again. "We share everything, remember? Thomas was 6 months old when Mr. Brennan fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, then progressed to fever and weakness. The doctor diagnosed pneumonia and did what he could, but the old rancher's body was worn out from 75 years of hard living. He died on a hot July evening, surrounded by his family, and was buried in the ranch cemetery beside his parents and grandparents. His death hit everyone hard, but particularly Ryder, who had loved the old man like a second father. Rebecca held him while he grieved, offering what comfort she could, and helped Sarah with the funeral arrangements and the legal matters that followed. Mr. Brennan's will left the ranch to his 3 sons, but with a provision that Ryder was to remain foreman and have final say on all operational decisions. The eldest son, Robert, was angry about this and made noises about selling his share, but Sarah talked him down with a combination of maternal affection and steely determination. In the end, all 3 brothers agreed to keep the ranch intact and let Ryder run it, at least for the time being. The responsibility weighed heavily on Ryder. The triple bar was a significant operation, and while he had been making most of the decisions already, having it be official was different. He worked longer hours, worried more, came home exhausted and preoccupied. Rebecca did what she could to help, managing the accounts even more carefully and offering advice when he asked for it. She also made sure he took time to rest, to play with Thomas, to remember that life was more than work. "You are going to run yourself into the ground," she told him one evening when he came home past dark for the 5th night in a row. "I am trying to keep this ranch afloat," he said, his voice sharper than usual. "You are trying to do everything yourself," Rebecca corrected. "You have good men working for you. Trust them to do their jobs. You do not have to carry it all alone." Ryder looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the exhaustion and fear beneath his determination. "What if I fail? What if I lose the ranch Mr. Brennan trusted me to protect?" "Then we will figure out what comes next together," Rebecca said. "But you will not fail because you are working too hard. You will fail because you worked so hard you made yourself sick or made bad decisions because you were too tired to think straight." He sighed and pulled her into his arms. "When did you get so wise?" "I married a man who needed someone to keep him from being an idiot," Rebecca said, and felt him laugh against her hair. Ryder took her advice and began delegating more, trusting his assistant foreman and the senior hands to handle routine matters while he focused on the bigger picture. The ranch continued to prosper, and slowly the tension eased from his shoulders. In the spring of 1885, Rebecca gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose, after Ryder's mother. Rose was smaller than Thomas had been, with dark hair and gray eyes like her father. She was also colicky and fussy, crying for hours every evening until Rebecca was ready to cry herself. Ryder took turns walking her, and Sarah made herbal teas that were supposed to help, and eventually she outgrew it and became a happy, placid baby who smiled at everyone. Thomas, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle for long stretches, talking to her in his own toddler language and bringing her toys she was too young to appreciate. Watching him, Rebecca felt her heart expand with a love so profound it was almost painful. "I never knew I could feel this much," she told Ryder one evening watching their children sleep. "Neither did I," he admitted. "Sometimes it scares me how much I love all of you. What if something happens?" "Then it happens and we survive it because that is what people do," Rebecca said. "But we cannot spend our lives being afraid of losing what we have. We have to live and love and trust that it is enough." The years rolled on, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and family life. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy who wanted to be a cowboy like his father. Rose became a sweet-natured child who loved animals and followed Sarah around the kitchen, learning to cook. In 1888, Rebecca gave birth to a third child, another son they named James. And in 1891, when Rebecca was 33 and beginning to think they were done having children, she delivered twin girls, Lucy and Grace. The cottage was too small for a family of 7, so Ryder and Rebecca built a house on a piece of land. Mr. Brennan's sons had sold them 5 acres on the eastern edge of the ranch property, near the creek where Ryder had proposed. It was a proper house, with 4 bedrooms and a big kitchen and a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. They moved in the spring of 1892, and Rebecca hung curtains and planted a garden and felt, for the first time since her father's death, like she had a home that truly belonged to her. The Triple Bar continued to thrive under Ryder's management. He implemented new breeding programs, experimented with different cattle breeds, and built a reputation for quality that brought buyers from across the region. Rebecca managed the accounts and the business side, and between them, they turned the ranch into one of the most successful operations in Arkansas. When Robert Brennan finally decided to sell his share in 1893, Ryder and Rebecca bought him out, becoming part owners. Sarah retained her portion, and the remaining 2 brothers were content to collect dividends while Ryder did the work. It was a good life. Rebecca thought often. Not easy ranch life was never easy, and raising 5 children kept her constantly busy but good. She woke each morning beside a man she loved, worked at something that mattered, and went to sleep each night grateful for what she had built. The children grew. Thomas, at 16, was already taller than his father and working as a full hand on the ranch. He had Ryder's steady nature and Rebecca's head for numbers, and she knew he would take over the ranch someday. Rose, at 14, was turning into a beauty with a gift for working with horses. James, at 10, was the wild one, always climbing trees or catching snakes or getting into some kind of trouble. The twins, at 7, were inseparable and utterly different. Lucy was bold and outspoken while Grace was shy and thoughtful. Rebecca looked at them sometimes and marveled that they existed, these 5 people who had not existed, when she walked into that saloon in Benton almost 16 years ago. She thought about the woman she had been then, lost and grieving and trying desperately to figure out where she belonged. That woman would hardly recognize the person she had become: confident, capable, loved and loving. It was in the fall of 1898 that Sarah Brennan passed away, dying peacefully in her sleep at the age of 76. Her death was not unexpected. She had been slowing down for years, but it still hurt. Rebecca mourned the woman who had welcomed her without judgment, who had taught her so much, who had become the mother she barely remembered. They buried Sarah beside her husband in the ranch cemetery, and Rebecca planted roses on the grave, the old-fashioned kind that smelled like summer and memory. With Sarah gone, Ryder bought out the remaining Brennan brothers, and he and Rebecca became sole owners of the Triple Bar. It was a bittersweet victory, weighted with responsibility and memory. But it was also the culmination of everything they had worked for, a legacy they could pass to their children and grandchildren. "We did it," Ryder said the day the papers were signed, pulling Rebecca into his arms. "The ranch is ours." "It was always ours," Rebecca said. "From the moment we started working to save it." That evening, they gathered the children in the parlor of the big house, the ranch house they had inherited along with the land, and told them what it meant. Thomas understood immediately, his eyes lighting with excitement and responsibility. Rose asked practical questions about what would change. James wanted to know if this meant they were rich. The twins mostly cared that there would be cookies after dinner. "What this means," Ryder said seriously, "is that we are stewards of something bigger than ourselves. This ranch has been here for 50 years, and if we do our jobs right, it will be here for 50 more. Maybe 100. It means we work hard, we treat the land and the animals with respect, and we take care of the people who depend on us. It means we build something that lasts." Rebecca watched her husband speak to their children and felt the weight of time and choice. She thought about the poker game that had changed everything, about the ring Ryder had pushed across the table with a smile that promised possibility. She thought about every decision that had led her here, to this moment, to this life she had built with this man and these children. "Your father and I met by chance," she said when Ryder had finished. "I walked into a saloon looking for work, and he gave me a deck of cards instead. I won every hand he dealt, and at the end of the night he gave me his grandfather's ring and asked me to stay. I almost said no. I almost left Benton the next day and never came back." "Why did you stay?" Rose asked. "Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say yes when everything in you wants to run," Rebecca said. "Because your father looked at me like I was worth something, and I needed to believe he was right. Because I was tired of losing things I loved, and I wanted to try building something instead." She looked at Ryder, and he looked back at her with the same steady gray eyes that had seen past her defenses 16 years ago. The same eyes that had watched her win at cards and deal with accounts and give birth and raise children and become someone she had not known she could be. "I stayed because of love," she said simply, "and I have never regretted it." The years continued to pass, gentler now, marked more by growth than by struggle. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property and brought her to live at the Triple Bar, building a small house near the creek. He and his wife, Margaret, had 3 children in quick succession, and Rebecca discovered the particular joy of grandchildren, all the love with less of the worry. Rose married a horse trainer who worked for a ranch near Hot Springs, and though Rebecca missed her, she was glad to see her daughter happy and doing what she loved. James, after a few wild years, settled down and became a ranch hand, proving more reliable than anyone had expected. The twins went away to school in Little Rock, something neither Rebecca nor Ryder had ever had the chance to do, and came back full of ideas and energy. Ryder's hair went gray, then white, but he remained strong and capable, still riding out to check fences and moving cattle even as he approached 60. Rebecca found herself slowing down more than she liked, her joints stiffening on cold mornings, her eyes needing spectacles for close work. But she still managed the ranch accounts, still advised on business decisions, still sat on the porch with Ryder in the evenings and talked about everything and nothing. It was on one such evening in the summer of 1905 that Ryder reached over and took her hand. They were in their 50s now, sitting on the porch of the house they had built together, watching the sun set over land they owned, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had created. "You remember the first time I saw you?" Ryder asked. "Of course. I walked into the Silver Dollar and you were dealing cards. You looked so determined," he said, smiling at the memory. "Like you were ready to fight the whole world if you had to. I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I was dusty and tired and desperate. You were brave and strong and refusing to give up." Ryder turned to face her, his weathered face soft with affection. "I knew right then, before we played a single hand, that you were going to change my life. I just did not know how much." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. After 23 years of marriage, he could still make her cry with simple honesty. "You changed mine too. You gave me a home when I had lost mine. You gave me purpose when I felt adrift. You gave me a family and a future and love." "We gave those things to each other," Ryder corrected. "That is what partners do." They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded, their hands intertwined, their bodies fitting together with the ease of long familiarity. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed and a horse whinnied. Closer, they could hear Thomas calling to his children and the sound of Margaret laughing at something one of them had said. "I would do it all again," Rebecca said softly. "Every bit of it exactly the same. Even the scary parts, especially the scary parts, because they led to this." Ryder lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to the ring she still wore, the one he had pushed across a poker table with a smile and a hope. "I love you, Rebecca Cole. I love you too," she said. "Always." The sun set fully, leaving them in the soft darkness of a summer night, and they stayed there on the porch until the stars came out, holding hands and counting blessings, and living in the certainty that they had chosen well, all those years ago, when chance and courage had brought them together. Life continued its forward march, bringing both joy and sorrow as all lives do. In 1908, Thomas and Margaret gave Rebecca and Ryder their 7th grandchild, a boisterous boy they named Ryder after his grandfather. James finally married, taking a quiet girl from town as his wife, and they built a house on the western edge of the ranch property. Rose and her husband moved back to Benton when his father died, taking over the family ranch, and suddenly she was close enough to visit regularly. The twins finished school and came home, Lucy to work on the ranch books with Rebecca and Grace to teach at the school in town. Ryder had a health scare in 1910, a bout of pneumonia that terrified Rebecca and left him weak for months. But he recovered, stubborn and determined, refusing to let something as small as illness slow him down permanently. He was more careful after that, letting Thomas take on more of the heavy work, but he still rode out every day and still had final say on all ranch decisions. Rebecca's own health remained good, though she tired more easily, and her memory sometimes played tricks on her. She officially retired from managing the ranch accounts in 1912, turning them over to Lucy, who had inherited her mother's gift for numbers. It was strange at first, not having that daily work, but Rebecca discovered she enjoyed the freedom. She spent more time with her grandchildren, teaching them to play cards and telling them stories about the old days. She tended her garden and read books and sat on the porch with Ryder, watching the world go by. On their 30th anniversary, in November 1913, their children threw them a party at the big ranch house. Half the county seemed to show up, filling the house and spilling out into the yard. There was food and music and dancing, and toast after toast celebrating the couple who had built the triple bar into what it was. Rebecca wore a new dress in soft gray silk, and Ryder wore his best suit, and they danced together the way they had at their wedding, a little slower now but no less certain. 30 years, Rebecca said as they moved across the floor. That is a long time. Not long enough, Ryder replied. I want 30 more. That would make us 90 years old. Then we will be 90 and still dancing. She laughed and rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar smell of him soap and leather and something indefinably Ryder. Around them, their children and grandchildren and friends celebrated, but Rebecca was aware only of the man in her arms, the steady beat of his heart, the strength in his hands. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For seeing me. For believing in me. For giving me a life I did not know I could have. Ryder pulled back enough to look into her eyes. I should be thanking you for exactly the same things. You took a lonely cowboy and gave him a reason to wake up smiling. You turned a ranch into a home. You made me better than I ever could have been alone. We made each other better, Rebecca said. That is what love does. They kissed then, in the middle of the dance floor with everyone watching, and the room erupted in cheers and applause. Rebecca blushed and Ryder grinned, and they kept dancing as the music played on. The years of the Great War came and went, touching their lives only indirectly. Prices for beef rose, labor became scarcer, and there was a general sense of unease about the state of the world. But the triple bar weathered it as it had weathered everything else, adapting and persevering. Thomas ran the ranch now in all but name, with Ryder serving as advisor and elder statesman. The grandchildren were growing up, the older ones starting to think about their own futures, the younger ones still wild and full of energy. Rebecca and Ryder settled into the rhythms of old age together. They woke with the sun and went to bed early. They took slow walks around the property, Ryder's hand steadying Rebecca when the ground was uneven. They sat on the porch and watched the world, content to let it spin without them for a while. They played cards sometimes, and Rebecca still won more often than not, and Ryder still pretended to be outraged. You have been cheating for 40 years. He accused one afternoon, his eyes twinkling. I have been winning for 40 years, Rebecca corrected. There is a difference. Prove it. So she did, showing him her hand and the mathematical reasoning behind every decision she had made during the game. Ryder listened, nodding, and then shook his head in mock defeat. You are too smart for me, Rebecca Cole. You always have been. That is why you married me. One of many reasons. They grew older together, their bodies slowing but their minds sharp, their love deepening with each passing year. They watched their grandchildren grow and eventually start bringing home sweethearts of their own. They attended weddings and funerals, celebrated births and mourned deaths. They lived through a pandemic in 1918 that killed millions worldwide, but somehow spared everyone at the Triple Bar, a fact Rebecca attributed to Sarah's ghost looking after them. In the spring of 1923, Ryder took ill again, this time more seriously. He developed a fever that would not break, and the doctor could only make him comfortable and wait. Rebecca sat by his bedside for 3 days straight, holding his hand and talking to him even when he was not conscious enough to respond. The children came and the grandchildren, and they took turns keeping vigil. On the third night, Ryder woke clear-eyed and lucid. He looked at Rebecca, sitting beside him in a chair she had not left except to use the privy, and he smiled. "You are still here," he said, his voice raspy but strong enough. "Where else would I be? You should sleep." "I will sleep when you do." She squeezed his hand. "How do you feel?" "Tired, but better for seeing you." He was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Rebecca, if I do not," she interrupted fiercely. "Do not you dare. Listen to me." His voice was gentle but firm. "If I do not make it through this, I need you to know something. These 41 years with you have been the best of my life. Every single day, even the hard ones. You made me happier than I ever thought possible. You gave me a family and a home and a reason to be better than I was. And I am not afraid to die because I know I loved and was loved in return. There is nothing left undone between us." Rebecca was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "We were supposed to have more time. 30 more years, remember? We had enough. We had a lifetime." He pulled her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles the way he had kissed the ring so many times before. "Promise me you will keep living. Keep playing cards and tending your garden and spoiling the grandchildren. Do not spend whatever time you have left grieving for me. I cannot promise that." "Then promise me you will try." She nodded, unable to speak. Ryder held her gaze for a long moment, and Rebecca saw everything in his eyes: love and gratitude, and a peace that came from a life well lived. Then he closed his eyes and fell back asleep, his breathing slow and steady. He died the next morning, just as the sun was rising over the ranch he had devoted his life to protecting. Rebecca was holding his hand, and she felt the moment he left, the subtle shift from presence to absence. She sat there for a long time afterward, crying quietly, saying goodbye to the man who had seen her at her worst and loved her anyway, who had built a life with her out of nothing but hope and hard work. They buried Ryder beside Sarah and Mr. Brennan in the ranch cemetery. Under an oak tree that had been planted the year the Triple Bar was founded. It seemed like the whole county came to the funeral, paying respects to a man who had been fair and honest and good. Rebecca stood surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. There were 3 of those now, and tried to be strong. But when they lowered the coffin into the ground, she felt something break inside her, a grief so profound it was almost unbearable. The weeks that followed were the hardest of her life, harder even than losing her father. She moved through the days mechanically, eating when people reminded her to eat, sleeping fitfully when exhaustion forced her to. The house felt too big and too empty without Ryder's presence. She found herself looking for him constantly, expecting to see him on the porch or in his chair by the fireplace, and the repeated realization that he was gone was like losing him over and over again. But slowly, very slowly, she found her way back to living. Her children helped, refusing to let her sink into isolation. They visited constantly, bringing grandchildren who needed minding and problems that required her advice. Lucy took over the house, essentially moving in to make sure Rebecca ate and bathed and got dressed every day. Rose came twice a week with flowers from her garden and news from town. Thomas sat with her in the evenings, not talking much but just being present, and his solid, steady presence reminded her so much of Ryder that it hurt and comforted in equal measure. The grandchildren helped most of all. They were too young to be somber for long, and their energy and noise and chaos pulled Rebecca back into the world whether she wanted to be pulled or not. She found herself teaching them to play cards, just as her father had taught her, and she had taught her own children. She told them stories about their grandfather, about how he had given her a ring and a chance and a life. She watched them grow and learn and become themselves, and she saw Ryder in their faces and their gestures and their laughter. 6 months after Ryder's death, Rebecca was sitting on the porch when young Ryder, now 15, and already showing signs of becoming as tall and capable as his namesake, came to sit beside her. "Grandmother, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. How do you keep going?" "After losing someone you love so much." Rebecca looked at the boy, seeing the beginning of adult understanding in his young face. "You remember them," she said. "You hold on to the love and let go of the pain bit by bit. You honor them by living the way they would want you to live, fully and bravely and with an open heart. And you trust that somewhere, somehow, they are still with you. You believe that grandfather is still with you." Rebecca thought about it, about the way she sometimes felt Ryder's presence in the house they had built, about the dreams where he seemed so real she woke expecting to find him beside her. "I believe that love does not end when life does. I believe that what we built together, what we shared, that is still here in you and your siblings and cousins. In this ranch, in this family. He is gone, but he is also everywhere I look." The boy nodded, processing this. "I miss him. I miss him too, every single day." Rebecca put her arm around her grandson's shoulders. "But I am also grateful. Grateful I had him at all, grateful for every moment we shared. That is what I am trying to hold on to, not the loss, but the gift." Young Ryder leaned into her embrace, and they sat together on the porch as the sun set. Two people bound by blood and love and memory. Rebecca lived for 5 more years after Ryder's death, years that were quieter and slower, but not without joy. She attended weddings and celebrated births, including the arrival of her first great-great-grandchild, a little girl named Rebecca after her. She watched the Triple Bar continue to thrive under Thomas's management, the ranch growing and adapting to the changing times. She played cards with her grandchildren and taught them the lessons her father had taught her about courage and resilience, and doing what needed to be done. And every evening, weather permitting, she sat on the porch of the house she and Ryder had built and watched the sun set over the land they had protected. She wore his ring still, never having taken it off since he slipped it on her finger at their wedding. She talked to him sometimes, telling him about her day, asking his advice on problems she was trying to solve. She liked to think he heard her. She liked to think he was waiting for her, wherever he was, ready to take her hand and dance with her again. Rebecca Cole died peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1928, at the age of 70. She was surrounded by family, her room full of flowers and the sound of grandchildren playing outside. She died the way she had lived, with dignity and grace, loved and loving. They buried her beside Ryder under the oak tree, and the whole county came to pay their respects once again. At the funeral, Thomas stood and told the story of how his parents had met, about the poker game and the ring and the smile that had changed everything. He talked about the life they had built from that chance meeting, about the love that had sustained them through 4 decades of joys and sorrows, triumphs and struggles. "My mother used to say that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say yes when everything in you wants to run," Thomas said. his voice thick with emotion. "She said yes to my father, to this ranch, to the family we became. And in doing so, she taught all of us what love really means, not just the easy moments, but the hard ones too. Not just the beginning, but the middle and the end. She taught us to be brave enough to build something that lasts." The family gathered afterward at the big ranch house, sharing food and memories and stories. Lucy showed the younger generation the carefully kept ledgers that documented decades of ranch operations, her mother's precise handwriting filling page after page. Rose brought out the box of letters Rebecca had saved, correspondence with family and friends and business associates that painted a picture of a life fully lived. The grandchildren shared their favorite memories, card games and cooking lessons, stories and advice, the steady presence of a woman who had never been too busy to listen. And in the years that followed, the Triple Bar continued to thrive, passing from generation to generation just as Ryder and Rebecca had hoped. Thomas ran it until his own son was ready to take over, and that son eventually passed it to his daughter, and on and on. The ranch adapted to automobiles and tractors, to changing markets and new technologies, but the core of it remained the same: land and cattle and family, hard work and integrity and stewardship. In the main house, now over 100 years old and lovingly maintained, visitors could still see the small office where Rebecca had worked to save the ranch's accounts. They could see the bedroom where she and Ryder had slept, the porch where they had sat together through thousands of evenings. And in a place of honor in the parlor, there was a framed photograph from their 30th anniversary, showing a couple in late middle age, dressed in their finest, looking at each other with undisguised love. Beside the photograph was a simple silver ring under glass, the engraved pattern of leaves and vines still visible despite decades of wear. And beneath the ring was a small placard with words Thomas had chosen. In 1882, in a saloon in Benton, Arkansas, a man gave a ring to a woman he barely knew and asked her to take a chance on him. She said yes, and everything that came after this ranch, this family, this legacy grew from that moment of courage and faith. May we honor their memory by living as bravely as they did, loving as deeply, and building with the same commitment to something greater than ourselves. The Triple Bar Ranch endured, a testament to what two people could create when they chose partnership over isolation, when they were brave enough to believe in possibility, even when circumstance suggested otherwise.